Welcome, everybody. We're here at the SEMA Collision and Refinishing stage. On behalf of the Society of Collision Repair Specialists, we are putting on a session today on pushback and effective countermeasures. I'd like to thank our sponsors that allow us to put this on. Take a good look at them. If you see them on the show floor, thank them. I'd like to introduce you to some of our SCRS board and good friends. I'd like to start off with John Mosley, Clinton Body Shop.
Thank you, Kye.
Bruce Halcro, Capital Collision.
Thank you.
Rob Grieve, Nylund's Collision.
Appreciate you, brother.
My name's Kye Yeung, European Motor Car Works. So a lot of times we hear from repairers on situations that they have day to day where there's some procedures that need to be charged for proper repairs, safety repairs, and they usually have some pushback. And pushback meaning some of the insurers either refuse to pay a value or acknowledge it as a item that needs to be addressed. So today, my friends and I, we're going to cover a couple of the popular ones. And since we're around the country, our different markets have different situations. And some, like with myself from California, we have the Bureau of Automobile Repair that we can rely on, Department of Insurance, where we can file a consumer complaint. And we just want to cover some of the tips that have worked for us in the past and maybe cover some that didn't work. So we'll start off today with ADAS calibration. So what's happened is obviously in some states you have to do the pre-scan and the post-scan. That is the law in some states now. I know in California that's a item that you have to address. So what happens is when you take a vehicle in and you put on the estimate, a pre-scan, and it's denied, what do? So I'll start off with Bruce.
Well, we've run into recently with some insurers that don't want to pay not only for a pre-scan but also a post-scan. What we generally do is we'll pull the manufacturer's required procedures for that particular vehicle, whether it's a GM, Ford, whatever. We'll have a discussion with the customer, let them know that this is what Ford says we need to be doing to your F-150. This is what your bill payer is going to cover. How do you want us to handle it? We've had great success with the customer wanting us to do the correct thing for their vehicle. Then we help them try to get reimbursed by the bill payer.
That's good. That's in your market, right, Montana? So, John, you suffer the same flight, or are you getting compensated for ADAS calibration? And
We get compensated on most of them, Kye. We don't have the provision you have in California that requires the insurance company to pay it. In our market, it's probably the same as it is in many of the people's market here, where the insurance company says, well, that's not custom and that's not normal and customary in your market, so we don't have to pay that. Well, we don't care what they say is normal and customary. We actually, every repair we do is based on a repair plan that we prepare based on the OEM procedures for that particular make, model, and vehicle. We go over this with the customer ahead of time. Before we even take the car in, we already know the companies there's going to be a problem with. We explain it all to the customer. We get a signed authorization authorizing us to repair the car completely and properly, because if they're not willing to do that, we're not going to repair the car to start with. But if we get into a conflict, then we can call our insurance commissioner. What we do, we don't call, we use an email, so we always have a paper trail. We email the customer, the insurance commissioner, the appraiser, and his supervisor that's handling the claim, and with a copy of those repair procedures, and let them know what's being paid, what's not being paid, and why we're doing it. And we find that by doing that, most of the time we get paid.
I just wanted to say that in California, it's required that the shops do the ADAS pre-scan, post-scan, and not that the insurance has to pay for it. So, Rob, what do you do in Colorado?
Well, we really don't really experience that problem so much. But, you know, with any of the ADAS systems, they think that a pre and a post scan is going to fix everything if they're even going to pay for it. When it's not really the truth. There's so much more you have to do by going in and checking, you know, occupant and seat weights, and a lot of times I find if we just educate the adjuster on all the other things that have to be done in addition to just the pre and post scan, they generally acknowledge it. Plus, you got to have all your procedures and manufacturer documents to back it up.
So what's important, though, is obviously documentation. What we do basically is we'll pull up an OEM procedures that indicates it, a pre-scan and a post-scan, maybe a dynamic calibration needs to be done. We'll document that. We'll get an addendum from the insurance company denying that. Then when we can tell the consumer when they file the complaint to the Department of Insurance that it was denied, and they have all of the documentation indicating that it needed to be done. So sometimes they get compensated and the shop will never know about it. The customer winds up paying for the scans, and then they get compensated on the back end. So I wish I had a percentage of success, but that's how it usually works out in our market. So another thing that is pretty common is sublet markup. Seems to be a big issue. As shop owners, you know we carry that liability. What happens is when we take in a vehicle and it's on our work order, we basically inherit the liability of that repair. So if you're going to pick and choose a sublet vendor, if that liability doesn't have a value that allows you to basically have a cushion to inherit that risk, then we have a problem. So I'm going to start with Rob. Sublet markup, what's it like in your market?
It depends on what carrier, and for the most part, you know, it doesn't. We don't know what day it is, you know, because it's different every day with every different insurance company. They all move back and forth on their idea of how they want to handle that. But if they indicate to us that they are not willing to pay a sublet markup, then we immediately fire off an email to them letting them know that when the vehicle is ready to go to the dealership for calibrations and so on and so forth, they can make all those arrangements. They can get the car there. They can work with the service advisors and make sure that what needs to get done is getting done. They can pick it up, they can pay for it, and they can bring it back. Once they get a release from the guest that they're taking it into their care, custody, and control. And, you know, they look at you like you got 10 heads, but most times they just pay the markup.
So one important thing is when you do get a consumer that's bringing you a vehicle, it's important to basically explain what issues might develop at the onset before you take the job on, so that you don't take in the vehicle and all of a sudden, knowing full well this carrier you're working with denies it every time, and then you go back to the consumer. That's where we get a negative, you know, reaction. The consumer wasn't prepped ahead of time that this may happen, and so now we're going back, and it gives our industry a black eye because it looks like we're going back for money. So we always try to qualify that customer ahead of time, knowing which carrier they have, knowing what issues may come up, just to prepare them. Because obviously you want a consumer that's on your side. It's their vehicle. We're looking after their safety. We're looking after their family safety, and we're looking after the value of their automobile after we're done doing the repair. So, Bruce?
Yeah, we have a similar policy, similar to Rob's, to where we let the bill payer that wants to deny the markup handle the sublet from start to finish. A lot of them will try to, well, not a lot of them deny it, but the ones that do will say, well, we're paying you X amount of dollars to pick up and deliver that vehicle. That's a whole different process than the sublet markup. That sublet markup, you've got to account for it. You've got to manage the process with them. You've got to have the vehicle there at a certain time, pick it up when it's done, and all of those are the things that are part of that sublet markup. With that, we have the customer involved from the very first contact. In fact, our initial estimate is sent to the customer with the bill payer CC'd on it, and we're doing that on their behalf, on the vehicle owner's behalf, and we make that clear. And any other subsequent sublet or supplements, anything else to have to do with the repair of their vehicle that may be a change in that bill, the customer is on that email, always.
That's good. Thank you, Bruce. How about you, John?
You know, the thing we should all remember as a business is that every one of these dealers, or if it's an independent or whatever that we're dealing with, every one of them has a price that's a retail price, and they have a price that's a wholesale price for guys like us. So what I ask our dealers to do is put down the retail price for that operation, just like they would if it was somebody off the street. Don't just put down the price they're going to do it for Clinton Body Shop. They can give me the wholesale price, but I'm not beholden to the insurance company to give them a copy of what my price was from that dealer, whether it's on a part or whether it's on a service. All they need to know is what the dealer charges for the retail price, because everybody knows we're all going to get different percentages based on the volume of parts we buy or service we buy, whatever. And that relationship with that dealer is no business of the insurer. So that's what we do. We ask for a retail price for the service. We ask for, for our wholesale price, and we bill for that retail price. And most of the time it gets paid.
That's great, John. So another thing to think about if you're a shop owner, maybe invest in the equipment and the technical staff to do it in-house to avoid this. Instead of subletting things out like glass, balancing tires and things like that, even remanning wheels and stuff, do it in-house. Keep the profit center in your shop. If you're going to have a lot of pushback on areas that you have an option to go around. Now, obviously, there's some things that you have to go back to the dealer to do, but minimize your stress. Look at that avenue also. So we have another thing that I've heard shop owners tell me, that we finally have convinced the third parties to pay feather edge, block, and sand. But a lot of times they put that under a body column, so we're not getting compensated for the materials on the refinishing end. Sometimes they'll give us security and say, hey, we'll give you another hour on the repair. But they cheat us on the material cost because it's not in the refinishing column. So, Bruce, you want to pick up on that?
Well, I've actually been billing for that procedure for about 15 years now, and we kind of have it down to a fine art. We put that in the refinish column. Some of them want it in the body column. That's a situation that I will negotiate. And how I negotiate that is, if you want to put that in the body column, I will bill you with a paint invoice, and that'll be non-negotiable. We've had great success with that. Personally, I've always believed that this industry will take a great step forward when we bill off an actual invoice than off of an arbitrary number multiplied by another arbitrary number that really has nothing to do with each process or each repair.
Rob, you want to address that in your area?
Yeah, it's like you said, we get them to pay it. There's not a problem with that, but sometimes they want to monkey around the numbers and you don't get the materials or something. It's just not a hill I'm willing to die on. I'm looking for a whole bunch of other things that make up the difference. So,
John.
Well, in our experience, I found in our area, the insurers that are going to fuss about materials for body materials are going to be the same insurers that don't want to pay what the total refinish cost should be anyhow. And for that reason, we'll do an invoice. We use PMC Logic. I know there's others out there, but we use the invoicing system and provide a complete invoice for every piece of sandpaper, the tape, whatever it took to make that repair, in addition to the necessary parts. And when you present that invoice, we find that most of the time you're going to get paid for it without a hassle. They don't like it, but they pay it.
I'm fortunate out in California, we have the Bureau of Auto Repair that basically says you put it on the car, better be on a line item. So what happens is instead of doing the multiplier, we can generate a receipt for everything that we use, and we know that we're doing what the law says that we have to do. And if there's any pushback again, we help the consumer file a complaint to the Department of Insurance and give them all the necessary paperwork to support that document. So another one is obviously, I'm hoping everybody here that's a shop owner is looking up OEM procedures before they do the repair. Sometimes these things you have to pay a subscription, either whether it's a day subscription or a week subscription or a yearly subscription, but there's a value in, there that you have to pay. The other issue is sometimes these repair procedures are 400 or 500 pages long. And your estimator or your blueprinter might spend 2-3 hours trying to find where these procedures are. And what's funny is each manufacturer, depending on the continent, and I say that because I do a lot of European vehicles, the way they do their table of contents is way different than how the Japanese might do theirs and how domestic vehicles are done. So unless you work on those cars all the time, you could be looking all over the place to find a document where those, obviously repair procedures are. So to help get compensated, we write the OEM repair procedures for structural, for body, another line item, mechanical, or electronics or electrical. So we don't have a value for just looking up OEM procedures. We'll itemize those down and we'll attach the page numbers to the bottom of that line and submit that estimate to the appraiser, so that he has documentation. If something comes back from their supervisor and says, hey, we're not paying that, at least they have a paper trail saying, hey, they did it. This is what we need to do. This is what they have to do. Rob, how do you handle something like that?
You're talking about just looking up, getting paid for procedures? Yeah. It has to be paid. It has to be done. It's the only way you can fix the car properly, and they need to pay to fix the car properly and put it back to pre-loss condition. So, I mean, that's just the way it is. And yes, they push back, there's no doubt about it, but we put line notes of the actual repair procedure. I don't give them the repair procedure. If they want the repair procedure, you got to cough up the money to look it up and go through all the admin. So by and large, we get paid every time.
Okay. So Bruce, how do you deal with these admin fees and OEM procedure lookup?
We do something similar to Rob. We do not send them the actual repair procedures. We will say on page E69, these items are included with how to do this. We'll tell them where to go get them, but most of them don't want to compensate us for our subscriptions, so we're not going to give them that subscription material. They can look it up themselves. As far as the actual time, what we do is it generally depends on the size of the procedures. Some are 40 pages, some are 3, and we do bill that out accordingly is kind of how we do it.
Thank you, Bruce. How about you, John?
I guess I'm going to have to start being more of a hard ass like my cohorts here, because I've been too nice to them. If they ask for those procedures, we actually give them the copies of the pages and highlight it for them, things like that. But one thing we do when we pull those procedures, we scan every procedure, every page of that, all our parts invoices, all our labor documents. We have a quality control sheet that each employee, when he finishes that job, whether it's the structural tech, the mechanic, the body tech, the painter, he actually signs off saying that he read those procedures, because we go to all the trouble to pull them, present them. He has to sign off saying that he read them and he's abided by them and he's completed them, that repair according to the procedures. So when they see that along with everything else we do, most of the time we get paid. When we don't, unfortunately, we had to fall back on our original contract with the owner that he has to pay the deficient part of the repair bill. And our owners are good enough that we seldom ever have anybody with a hard feeling about that, because we covered up front, like you addressed, Kye. We make that initial contact with the customer being an information type session.
So, going back to that, qualifying the customer, what we do when we build that repair plan and get that initial estimate is we're building a package just in case our customers have to go to war to get recompensated. So what happens is that would be what they would submit with an addendum from that third party indicating that they're not paying that line item. And so if they can go in with as much documentation, and here it is physically, they have a much better chance of getting compensated if they had to pay out of pocket. So, we have a situation sometimes when it's not successful. Have you guys ever had situations where the countermeasures didn't work? Bruce?
So, of course, we have. If I said we didn't, I'd be like Rob. We, a lot of times, will negotiate that with the customer, but honestly, we have a lot of times where a customer might have to write a check and pay for some stuff. There are certain things we can negotiate with them. We find a lot of times that when our customer does have to pay extra, we give them some help at the end, and they'll eventually get reimbursed. So we try to work that as hard as we can. There are some items that we do not negotiate, and that being scans. When we're pre-qualifying that customer, if that customer chooses not to have a proper scan, we help them find another shop, to be honest with you.
What's neat out there is there's a ton of videos that ICAR puts on, and the SCRS board has videos to help educate the consumer. And some of these videos actually help. If we've got a appraiser in the house that obviously never repaired a car before, then we can show them, physically what has to happen. It's just like ADAS calibration. They don't know the steps involved. They think that you just plug in this machine and automatically spits out a receipt and it's done. So what happens is these videos are done for education, but it's for both sides. So it's something that they should consider. John, you have any stories that you didn't have success on, that you keep pushing, or is it?
No, as far as the videos and all, we have 2 locations. My son runs our second location, and he's actually started a deal where some of you guys may have it also. Has a TV running in the lobby, and he's got all these videos running on a continuous loop. So while a customer's sitting there waiting or whatever, then he gets to sit there and see those videos, and he's already kind of educated. He or she is already educated as to what some of the problems may be, and we're about to start that in our location also.
So I again have shop owners reach out to me, and I'm sure you guys get the same calls. Color, sand, and polish. It's funny, if you've been in the industry long enough, there was a time they didn't pay for it at all. Then there's a time they did pay for it. Then there was a time that now we don't pay for it again. Now it's called color, sand, or nib or whatever. So that seems to be a big pushback. We have insurers now that force us to take pictures to validate that we actually had to do it. Well, how do you get compensated for that? What we do, we add an admin fee to take those photos, right? So that's how we address that. How about you, Rob, in your market, the color, sand, and polish issue?
Again, all these things need to be done in order to make it pre-loss condition. And somebody has to pay the bill. And that's just the end of it. Somebody has to pay the bill. We will help the guest by means of getting them connected with somebody that maybe can do an appraisal clause or invoke their appraisal clause, or go through a diminished value claim, and anything they didn't pay gets added onto that as well. We've had tremendous success with that. But in the end, somebody's got to pay the bill. It's not like, the rates that we're working with are so lucrative that we can just keep eating stuff. We're paying people to do it. They're not working for free.
Thanks, Rob. How about you, John?
Well, used to we had to take pictures, we had to do all this, had to prove it, and we did it every time. But we started charging for that. Same as you said a while ago, we have a separate line for it. And now we only have 2 companies that even mention that. One of them is on just about every job. So it's kind of a second source of revenue for us, if you want to know the truth about it. If we're going to take the pictures, we don't have anybody that comes to work for free. So we put a minimal charge on there, but but there is a charge.
So what we have to remember as shop owners, if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get paid for it. So be consistent. Put it on every sheet. Even though a carrier you know is not going to pay for it, put it on your sheet. We need to stay focused and have a consistent repair plan time and time again.
The one situation that I always like is when the bill payer will tell me the only reason I need to denib and polish something is because my booth's dirty. And I always challenge them. And my challenge is find one other operation in the P pages that there's a labor time allowed for because of a shop's inadequacies. I have not had one of them be able to answer that.
And you know, Kye, there's, I know Lexus has documentation on the need to do it, and sometimes needs to be done in the paint booth in between clear coats. So there's plenty of places to get documentation that says this needs to be done. It's even in the databases. So if it's recognized in the database as a not included operation, then it must be something, right? We're not making it up.
No, I agree, Rob. And one of the things that you want to consider is that when these cars were painted from the factory, they were body in white. They were clean, sterilized. We don't have sterilized cars. Sometimes our cars have 100,000 miles on them. So, you know, we're not painting in the same environment. So when they say, hey, the factory can do it, your equipment isn't good enough, you need to either buy a downdraft or you need this, this, and this. You got to remind them that what we're dealing with cars that have been driven. So, sometimes the paint isn't going to be completely perfect because of that value. Unless you want to charge them to take the vehicle completely apart down to a shell, it doesn't make sense. So there's some argument points that we want to bring up, right? So another thing, total loss charges is something that we deal with. I know that in our market, there's certain things that we can charge for, certain things we can't. And administrative fees, the Bureau of Auto Repair feels that that's an included item. So you have to basically rewrite the terminology on how you came about a charge. You can put down, again, look up OEM procedures, look up the value of the vehicle, do things like that, but you can't generically put down admin fees. So, we do that in our market, itemize what we had to do. Rob, do you have horror stories or
It's basically the same. We get paid for them. There's no doubt about it. The car's not leaving if we're not paid for it. So, the one thing I hear more and more is the insurance company saying, well, we're going to only pay you storage from the date you sent the supplement in, or, from the date we decided it was a total, or some other magical date. My insurance policy insures that vehicle the minute it comes on the property. That's when the storage starts, because that's when my expense starts.
Thank you, Rob. How about you, Bruce? Any good stories?
Yeah, we have a pretty clarified and defined list of charges and any of those things that we have to do while that vehicle is in our care. Is accordingly it's charged for. There's a price on it. All our storage charges are listed. Rates are on the wall. They know when they come in what that is.
John, anything to add to that?
Well, in Mississippi, we're a no-dumping state. In other words, it's illegal for an insurance company to leave a car at the shop because the towing and storage or whatever is more than the value of the car. So we've had probably a half dozen instances in the last 3 years where they may have paid us $5,000 or $6,000 in towing and storage because they simply forgot, or for whatever reason, they didn't come remove the car. It's not our fault. Like Bruce said, our storage rates and all are posted on the wall. Yep. They see them when they come in. It's on our sheet. There's no excuse for them not picking them up, so if they let them sit there, they have to pay for it. I want to say something before we get on another subject, Kye. We've talked a lot of this about procedures and about even denib and finesse, but if you don't understand everything you should be getting paid for, you can always call or email Danny at the DEG, the Data Enhancement Gateway, and he is a great source for showing you or explaining what is included and what's not included. There's been times that we had a kid to put a rear body panel in and it paid 5 hours. When Danny got through with the database inquiry, it now pays 18 hours to put that rear body panel in. So I'm encouraging everyone, use the DEG, because if you don't know what you're not getting paid for.
Great point, John. So I see a lot of head nodding out there, hopefully some shop owners. Are there any other questions or things that you guys have experienced that maybe we can share if we've had the same experiences? Any questions out there? Sir.
Yeah, the part about the storage, now most insurance company pays it, but there is a few that don't want to pay it. And what they're doing is they'll pay the shop and then they'll deduct it from the value of the car. How do you handle that?
Well, again, we've had situations where the payout of the vehicle was deducted from the consumer's
Yes.
end of it. So obviously, that's a huge situation that the owner now takes that loss. So again, back to my original point, is documentation when the vehicle was totaled, when the notification went out, how long that car sat on the shop floor, and if you can document that it was no fault of the consumer why that car was there for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that definitely helps that consumer retrieve that cost back.
So the consumer have to go back for the insurance company.
Unfortunately, at the end of the day, it is their vehicle. We're just a repair facility trying to get them whole. So that's the situation. We get caught in a crossfire. We just want to repair cars and make them safe. But unfortunately, because of the third-party payer, we inherit all the things that particular third party wants to, obviously, I want to use a term, properly, not commit bad faith to their insured or a claimant. So,
All right, thank you.
Good question.
I can answer direct to that. In our state, that's an illegal thing to do. We have had that situation. We've helped them run it to the DOI. The DOI has every time ruled in favor of the consumer. They cannot make that bill part of the settlement for that car in Montana. You may want to check your state law.
Rob, anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's simple. I've heard this conversation over and over. This is not new. We're getting faced with it too. But I had the guest reach back out to the insurance company and say, my policy says I owe the first $500 or $1,000, whatever the deductible is. You cover everything after that. You can't deduct that off my bill because that's like a double deductible. So,
That's a good point.
and again, it goes away. You need to be confident when you're talking to these people, and you need to, just have everything that you can at your fingertips as far as resources to back you up, like knowing the laws, what you can and can't charge for, and just be confident.
Another issue that you have that, like in our state, Florida, they use the same law that applies for a mechanic shop along for body repair, which is a two completely different process. They said that you're only allowed to charge storage 3 days after the car is finished. So you have a car sitting there for a week waiting for the insurance company, and most insurance companies, they're very thin on the amount of employees they have in the field. They're getting more virtual assignments, and less people are coming out to look at the car. So in Florida, we find that a car that would be supplemented in 2 days becomes a week, 2 weeks. And then one of them currently that we're challenging, that the county that we live in says, this statute says this, and it says it doesn't apply to a body shop. It's a mechanical statute where a car comes in for a starter or something like that. It's quite different. You can't equate both the same.
We had a similar thing in California where they wanted to adopt the towing legislative things and apply it to the body shop. So if you had your car towed,
You're stealing my thunder.
you know, basically, you know, that was an issue. They were adopting a different set of rules and applying it to our industry. Luckily, you know, we're able to reach out to the right people and get that reverse. But that situation happens everywhere.
Yeah, we had adjuster send, said it's against the law to charge what we're charging for storage. I'm like, that's cool. Send it on over. And what it actually was a PUC law that covers towing, like for people that do towing for a living. We don't do towing for a living. We aren't covered under that PUC law. But again, you need to know what's coming at you and how to get around that. And they paid the bill.
Thank you, Rob.
They did take the shot, though.
That's right.
We're always going
You
to
can-
take the shot.
That's right. Any other questions out there?
Yes, when it comes to the pre-scan and the post-scan situation, I noticed that a lot of these cars, as soon as you start the repair on some of them, you have to disconnect the battery, and then we're starting all over again with programming a whole bunch of things, because it's just a procedure that you do before you repair some of these cars that have, you know, electrical batteries or just the airbag systems and all that stuff. So as soon as what I've been trying to do is I pre-scan and then I scan again after I disconnect the battery, because now it's like another pre-scan. It's like a second pre-scan. I was trying to see, like, how do you guys solve that issue to get paid for all the new resets and electrical systems that you do, because I feel like you have to get paid individually for every single thing, because every single they think that because like you said, you plug in the scanner, they think that it's going to delete everything, and sometimes you have to go look at window reset, radio resets, and seat resets, and I don't know.
Test drive.
Yeah, I mean, how do you guys get paid for? Like, are you guys having luck getting paid for that individually, or obviously that's part of the beginning of the blueprinting while you're putting up the procedures because you know you're going to disconnect the battery. But I feel like I've been doing that, and the insurance companies, they look at me like I had 10 heads when I'm charging them, you know, multiple diagnostic things in between the pre-scan and the post-scan.
Well, I know that, and I'll date myself, we had a line item for reset electronics before they had all these computers and things. Just because we disconnected the battery, now all of a sudden the radio presets are off, the window switches are out, and it was pretty simple back in the day. So the advice I would give you is that if you're working on a particular brand and the OEM procedures indicate that you have to pre-scan it, disconnect the battery, and then pre-scan it again, then you have the documentation. That's a situation where you have to follow certain guidelines to be able to substantiate why you're charging that. And again, it might be standard operating procedures that your shop does, but again, to get compensated, we say documentation, that communication of why you did it is paramount. And as long as you can explain it, at least you can have them acknowledge the fact that it needed to be done. So that's all I can say. I mean, you're dealing sometimes with a person that was told deny. So you have to do your best job to convey why it needed to be done and substantiate as much evidence as you can to that.
Another question I have is about, like, when the cars need to go out somewhere, like you said, for an alignment and stuff like that. I feel like it takes a lot of power from the shop when somebody has to leave to go drop off a car in an alignment machine or a dealership. And I just been thinking more about, just since we have our own towing, just to tow it there, because I don't want the liability of somebody hitting me while the car's done just because I'm going for
Or the workman's comp exposure.
Exactly. So do you guys, I'm sure you guys have alignment machines in your shop. Oh, no? Some don't,
I do
some
not.
do. Some people do, some people don't. We do, but it's in one shop. I was thinking about just not even driving it and just towing it there and get paid for it. But in Miami, it's kind of different, you know. It's very tough to try to get paid because they're going to tell you, why don't you just drive it over there? And I tell them, I don't want to have the problem or the liability with it. So there's another 2 tow bills right there. So that $80 alignment that they used to paying turns into a $250 alignment. You know, so
All day, every day.
right?
Well, you got to remember one thing. If you have a vehicle that has to go get alignment or it has to go to a dealer, If it's unsafe to drive, if you've got the airbag SRS light on, it needs to be reset, or a safety condition, you're allowed to tow and bill for it because you can't put one of your employees in because of that liability. That's right.
Well, I can tell you firsthand from our shop, we get paid on every one of them from every insurance company. We won't let an employee drive one to a dealer for any type of service. They have to be towed, and we get paid for the towing there and the towing back. And I mean, if you find out if you start billing for that, I don't think you're going to get any pushback on it.
Keep in mind your workman's comp, too. Sometimes your workman's comp doesn't cover your employees off the site.
Yeah, how we'd handle that is if it needs an alignment, it needs a tow. But I'm a little nicer than some of these guys here. I'll actually go pick it up and drive it back once that's completed.
Rob, anything to add to that? We're running out of time.
No, other than to say the alignments are getting so complex. To have your own alignment machine is a really cool thing, but you got to have people that understand the different suspensions in these different cars and are able to put them back to where they need to be. And alignments, you're going to see more and more of them because every time you need to calibrate something, you have to start with an alignment in most cases. That's what the procedure says. So if you're going to get an alignment and you need to get calibrations done, just send it all to the dealer because let them do the calibrations unless you do your own in-house calibrations.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Well, I think our time is up. I really appreciate you guys giving the attention.
Thank you.
And attending.
Thank you for the questions.
Thank you
and
so
being
much.
here.
Oscar, I meet you.
guy that we started with.
Oh, good. Good.